Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here to help us celebrate. Tonight we're celebrating the work of our most recent Manuscript intensive series group. For those of you who don't know, just a quick recap, the Manuscript intensive is a year-long intensive group where people who are working on book-length projects come to have some support and camaraderie and structure and feedback to hopefully complete a book-length work. And almost everybody does, and it's just really magical work. And so wonderful to accompany each other in this process. I took part in it this year with these wonderful 5 other writers who are going to be reading tonight, and myself at the end. And it's just like, I can't write a book without this group. So, I mean, as it is, it takes me 10 years anyways, but I really couldn't do it without this group, because writing a book is lonely, hard, slogging kind of work, and it's really easy to question why you're doing it, or to wonder if it's right, or if you have anything to say at all, or and so to have the deadlines and the structure and the accompaniment of other writers, to get feedback from 5 other people on what you're doing, and you really become invested in each other's work, which is just great. It's kind of the icing on this wonderful cake. So I won't take up too much more time. We're going to hear from 6 readers total tonight. Each reader is going to go for around 7 minutes. Each reader will introduce the person who comes after them. So pay attention to the next introduction. And then afterwards, I'll take any questions if people have questions about this process, about what it's like to be in this group, anything like that. We do have details up on our website for any of you who are interested here or online, writersinprogress.com, and you go to the Manuscript group tab, Manuscript Intensive, and there are updated dates and details for the next group. It's a really great process. So writing is hard. Like, why do we do this? It's the agony of putting words on the page and trying to get it right, and writing and rewriting and overcoming all of our internalized critical voices and then all the externalized critical voices. Why do we do this? It's really a slog. I think in answer to that, I want to just give you something from Toni Morrison, the great late, about how stories are incredibly powerful, maybe the most powerful tool that we have as human beings to understand one another, to connect with one another, and they're very cathartic. They're very cathartic to hear, they're very cathartic to tell. So when I hear your story, it illuminates my mind, right? And I learn something, and I connect, and I understand. And when I tell my story to you, it's incredibly freeing and healing to not only write it down, but have it connect with an audience. And I think that's part of the magic of the workshop format and the groups that we do. Here's what Toni Morrison said, and it really resonated for me in these kind of crazy times that we live in. She said, "There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. Language is how civilizations heal. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom and art." So we'll launch right into the readings that you've come to hear tonight. Our first reader is Carla Mann. Carla is our West Coast participant. Where are you? You're right in front of me. Thank you for flying all the way out here from California. But what town are you in again? Idlewild, which is right near Palm Springs, this beautiful little town up in the mountains. So it's no small feat for you to get out here. So thank you. Carla is a retired businesswoman and an aspiring author working on her first novel, which we got to help her with this year. calling it The Weight of Expectations. It's the story of a family thrown into chaos when the young daughter becomes pregnant and then does the unimaginable, abandons her baby. The story is told through 4 perspectives: the daughter, Emily, her parents, Stephanie and Peter, and Hope, the woman who befriends Emily at her time of crisis. Emily's chapters are written in the second person, an uncommon approach that Carla uses to highlight her lack of a voice. And you will get to hear some of that tonight. So thank you, Carla. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody, and everybody on Zoom. Hello. So yes, the reading that I'm going to do is one of the first pieces from Emily. Rebecca didn't knock. Instead, she pushed the door open with the toe of her boot, like she'd been there 100 times, been to 100 parties in 100 Cracker Box houses. You held back, long enough to lose your nerve and get it back, then lose it again, long enough to say fuck it and step inside. A rush of air that tasted of smoke and stale breath filled your lungs. An energy you couldn't identify danced across the top of your skin, while a grin too big for the occasion found your face and wouldn't leave. Voices from a group of guys playing foosball collided with the sounds of a blaring TV and bounced from one dingy scuff wall to the next. Interesting. Rebecca tipped her head towards the entry wall where miscellaneous articles of clothing, including a bikini top and a pair of boxer shorts, hung from nails pounded right into the wall. Both of you jumped when a guy at the foosball table yelled, "Saka!" Another responded with "Bastard dog!" then tripped over one of the lawn chairs that circled the room. The other guys made jokes, threatened to cut him off. And in a weird way, it eased your nerves. The setting was different for sure, but the boys, they were just like high school boys. When the laughter died, a guy in a Hawaiian shirt and board shorts gave a deep bow and said, "Welcome, my ladies, and apologies for my comrades." Then he pointed down a short hallway and added, "Libations await yonder." He bowed again, and you thought about saying, "Thank you, kind sir," but before the words came out, another guy bellowed, "And fun awaits you right here." Then he grabbed his crotch, and a different kind of laughter made its way through the foosball gang. Rebecca eyed the crotch-grabbing guy like she was studying him. Then she flipped her hair back and said, "Sorry, not enough there." Groans erupted from the guys. Rebecca blew them a kiss on her way out of the room, and you tried not to look out of place. When you caught up to Rebecca, she was picking candy from a plastic jack-o'-lantern. "Those are most likely loaded," she pointed to a half-filled tray of brownies. "And the pizza looks left over from yesterday." Then she handed you a mini chocolate bar. "Someone will do a food run later. Until then, these are probably all that's safe." She popped a candy in her mouth and tossed the wrapper into a trash can that sat just under the edge of the table. Then she rummaged through a cooler for 2 bottles of water. "You have had alcohol before, right?" You lied, said yes, and hoped the heat collecting in your chest wouldn't create a rash. But even if it did, she wouldn't notice. She was too busy looking for Micah. "Okay, well, remember to drink lots of water. You know, pace yourself." She was beginning to sound like your mother. "And don't take pills from anyone." Then she lifted your purse strap over your head and set it on your opposite shoulder. "Wear it crosswise. That's the safest." "I don't need a babysitter." Your voice was harsh, but you didn't care. "Becca!" A girl with fat dreads swooped in and pulled Rebecca into a hug. "Come dance with me." "I should find Micah first." "Oh, screw him." Rebecca laughed. "Sounds like a plan." Then she grabbed your hand and made introductions. This is Sage. She's the one that turned me on to the Young Democrats." Sage added, "Don't forget Hash and Hannah." Rebecca shook her head, said, "Don't listen to her." Sage laughed. "No, but seriously, come dance, you too, Em." A part of you wanted to, but a bigger part was stuck on the idea of Rebecca thinking she needed to babysit you. So you said no, said you'd catch up with him later. Then Rebecca gave you a hug and whispered in your ear, "Promise me, 1 drink and that's it, okay?" You shook your head, bit your tongue, and when they were gone, you said, "Fuck you," and ate a brownie. It tasted disappointingly normal. Upstairs, you watched them dance from a bedroom window. When Micah joined in, then took Rebecca away, you thumbed through the textbooks and counted empty hangers. You remembered the condom and wondered if the sounds in the next bedroom were the 2 of them. The idea made you shudder. Not the idea of them, the idea of you listening. The idea of snooping like Goldilocks. You had to leave, but a greater urge was to hide. You tried a bedroom on the opposite side of the hall, but it was locked. You forced yourself back downstairs, found your way to the kitchen, nodded as people came and went, said boneless when someone asked your preference for chicken wings, accepted a beer from a guy rummaging through the refrigerator. It was cold, smelled of molasses cookies, and was bitter and prickly. You didn't like the way it attacked your throat. You gave it a second try, and a third, then you left it on the counter and went outside for fresh air. Someone said there was room in the jacuzzi for you. You said maybe later. On the other side of the yard, you watched a cornhole tournament. You clapped and cheered, fell into its easy rhythm, said things like good one or bad luck at appropriate times, settled into the comfort of being there, yet not being noticed. By the time everyone had had their fill of cornhole and moved on, you were in a trance that kept you locked in place. College applications, scholarships, cornhole, Noah, condoms, a million random things collided in your head. A voice broke in through the haze. "Is it Megan? Mandy?" It was the guy in the Hawaiian shirt. You thought he was talking to someone else. When you looked over your shoulder and no one was nearby, you realized he'd just made a mistake. You said no and assumed he'd make some excuse and leave. But instead, he stepped back, tilted his head sideways, and scanned the length of your body, eyes to toes, rubbing his chin as if pondering a difficult question. He made no attempt to hide his perusal of your body. Heat found your neck, rose to your cheeks. Your free hand raced to cover your midriff. You wanted to melt away from his cotton candy blue eyes, but there was nowhere to go. "Please tell me it's not as pedestrian as Mary." His voice, when he said the name, was filled with distaste. Your eyes locked with his. You told yourself to look away, but you couldn't. And without wanting to, you started to laugh. A small, nervous twitter that escalated into a shoulder-shaking, eye-watering howl. And the more you tried to contain it, the worse it got. People started to stare. He didn't seem to care. That made you not care. Panic took over his face. "Shit. I fucked myself, didn't I? I swear I didn't mean anything by it. Mary's a good name. I have an Aunt Mary and she's totally cool." Your laughter subsided long enough to squeeze out, "It's okay." In my defense, you do not look like a Mary, and I bet your friends agree with me. Otherwise, why would they call you M? And that's when a door in your head cracked open. You could be Megan or Mandy or anybody. You could slap this guy or you could flirt with him. Because in this place, there were no rules about who you should be or how you should act. There were no expectations to live up. You flipped your hair back, said, "Morgan, but I don't talk to strangers." "Daniel," he said. Then he kissed your hand and added, "At your service." You let Morgan take over. She said, "I seem to have lost my beer." Our next reading is from Jonathan Langmuir. Jonathan has a background in the visual arts with a focus on sculpture and printmaking, which ultimately meant becoming a starving artist and jack of all trades. A short list of the many occupations he has pursued includes painter, cabinet maker, wood instrument maker, kiln-fired glass artist, museum guard and installation specialist, massage therapist, body-mind counselor, and psychiatric nurse. Jonathan writes across genres, drawing from his diverse background and interest. He's currently working on a short story collection and a fantasy science fiction series called The Chronicles of Tourlaine, which is grounded in the subgenre of contemplative fiction and includes a dash of historical fiction. Today, he will read a selection from this series. Jonathan.
I apologize if I have to pause from time to time. My allergies are really bad. So a little context before I...
Make sure you're close to the mic.
A little context before I begin. Our protagonist, Jeanette, currently the only human on the planet Tourlaine, is trying to find her place within the Kawani race's hierarchical social structure and caste system. But not all the Kawani are happy she is among them. This is an emotionally intense scene. I'm wandering in the trees, the endless trees. The leaves are gone and the jealous branches stretch for the sky. One by one, the branches eat the stars until they all wink out, and the only thing left in the sky is a gibbous moon. Something moves away from a gnarled trunk. It keeps to the shadows, pausing when exposed like a statue among the skeletal branches. I can't breathe. The thing comes closer, sniffing at the air like it's on the hunt. It steps from the shadows, pause, sniff, sniff, pause, sniff. I tremble like I'm a rabbit in a cage with a lynx. I can't move. Sniff, pause, sniff. It steps into the moonlight and turns a faceless head towards me. It has no mouth, no eyes, no ears, just a nose in the middle of its pale, milky face. It takes another step, then another, craning its long neck one way, then another. Sniff, sniff. I can hear a rattle in its throat now. It reaches clawed fingers toward me. Sniff, rattle, sniff. One step, then two. Sniff, sniff. Another step, and another. It's close now. If I could move, I could almost touch it. An impossibly long arm reaches out. Its pale, bony hand nearly touches my body. Its head bobs and weaves as it sniffs. Its claws reach toward my face. The fingers dance in the air, making clicking sounds. It lifts its head toward the moon, howls, beats its chest, and lunges for my throat. I sit bolt upright in my bed, panting while my door rattles like someone is wrestling with it from the outside. I leap from my bed, sending it swinging violently on the ropes it hangs from. I pull the black cloth off from my cover from my lantern, and the pale green light leaps into the room. I face the door and reach out to still the bed from its swing. It's the only thing between me and the door. There's a muffled curse in Kawani, something about shit, blood, and guts, and then I hear quiet footsteps as the person pads around my node, and then away and out of earshot. It takes what seems an eternity before I can breathe again. And then it's in short, quick gasps. I sag to my knees on the floor and focus on my breathing until the ache in my gut eases. When I look down at my shaking hands, I realize I'm covered in sweat. I can see the dark patches staining my armpits and chest. I stand and pace back and forth across the 4-meter length of my egg-shaped dwelling. I can't sit still. I don't know how long I pace, just that it's long enough that my pounding heart isn't threatening to break a rib, and I start to feel a chill from the sweat coating my body. I'm calmer, but now the thoughts come. What would have happened if my door hadn't been barred? What would have happened if Taka hadn't taken me seriously and my wood door hadn't been reinforced with steel on the inside and the outside? Who the hell was that? Tenny? He's not supposed to be in this tree, not since he assaulted me. Was it someone else? Someone he's been talking to? Thwack! A yelp escapes my throat. Thwack! What the hell? I screech. Thwack! Something is hitting the outside of my node. Thwack! The side of the walkway arcs around. Thwack! I know that sound. I grew up hearing it all the time. Thwack! Someone's shooting arrows into the wood wall on the outside. Thwack! Kawani revere trees, especially the ones they make their homes in. Thwack! Who would do this? I don't know how long this goes on, only that it's probably less than a minute, though it feels like forever before it ends. And then I'm met with silence. The only sound is my teeth as they grind together, and my breath as it squeezes in and out of my constricted throat. Gradually, the tremble of fear turns to one of rage, and I'm pacing again. It's not enough, and I find myself pounding my bedding, my pillows, and a moment later, all my bedding is on the floor. I'm not sure how it got there, only that I'm kicking it around my little room. It's still not enough, but my head is cooler, and I realize I should burn off the adrenaline in a less destructive way. I kick up into a handstand against a wall and do shoulder presses until my arms fold from under me, and I have to roll out of my fall in a backward somersault away from the wall. Then I drop to the floor and do push-ups, then pull-ups on one of the rings the bed rope is tied to on the ceiling, then more lunges than I can count. And finally, I squat against the wall until my legs are trembling and spent. Finally, I can breathe normally, and the trembles subside. I'm pissed as hell, but the blind rage is gone. My mind meanders through the last week, and I see their faces as I walk about the tree with Taka or the Van Deer. 1 minute, the Kawani are smiling and friendly. The next, a Kawani is looking at me like I'm a blight on the land. How do I ever feel safe here when the glares happen every day? I can't keep this up. I close my eyes, and all I see is Tenny snarling at me before he mime shoots me with an arrow. I'm so grateful for the bar in my door, but I wish I didn't have to use it. I pour myself a glass of water and nurse it like a glass of whiskey, taking small sips and wishing I was drinking something with some kick to it. There's no going back to sleep. That ship sailed when the latch made the clicking sound my dreaming self turned into claws in my nightmare. That ship sailed when the door rattled and finally woke me up. And the ship sank when the arrows pierced the outside of my node. I resist the urge to go outside and inspect the damage. Whoever did this could still be outside, waiting in the dark. I wait for many minutes, but no one comes to retrieve the arrows. It's better that I leave them there, so when Silvana and Jovan come for me in the morning, they can see them with their own eyes. Eventually, I lay on my bed and stare at the ceiling, trying to will my thoughts into submission. But it's like they have a mind of their own, endlessly rehashing the same things until I want to tear my hair out. Gods, I wish this place had Valium or weed or some good old dark chocolate, something to take the edge off. Or pizza. Oh, how I wish I miss a good pizza. Comfort food. I would cut off my left pinky to have a cannoli fresh from the oven about now. I guess that's good news for my pinky. Sometime before dawn, I drift into that place halfway between sleep and wakefulness that I know all too well, where I remain suspended until there's a light coming through the cracks around my door, and I hear a knock on it that tightens my gut like it's in a vice. Our next reading is from Charu Gupta. Charu is a writer and former journalist. She wrote investigative and feature stories for weekly magazines for nearly 10 years before shifting into career marketing. She left her corporate job last year to devote herself to writing full-time. She is currently working on her first novel and lives in Amherst with her family. Welcome, Charu.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you, fellow writers. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to read an excerpt from an early chapter in my first novel in progress titled Riot. All you really need to know, not much, it's pretty self-explanatory, but all you need to know is that it's set in 1993, which I've been told is near historical fiction. All right. Rishi stepped out of his bedroom and straight into the living room. Just as he'd expected, his father, Mohan, was on the divan, his light, airy khadi cotton pajamas shifting as he recrossed his legs and turned the pages of the newspaper. He looked up at Rishi and back down again. Nandini, his mother, attuned to the slightest sound or movement Rishi made these days, walked out of the kitchen. There was a crisp, biting smell of roasted cumin seeds about her from the breakfast she'd made earlier in the day for his father. "Oh, good. You're finally awake," she said. "I'll make fresh parathas for you. Go sit with Papa." Rishi waited for her to smile, or maybe run her hands through his hair like she'd used to. But instead of rubbing his head, Nandini turned around and walked back into the kitchen. Her voice had been matter of fact, and he understood that even today, his last day in Bombay, she was not going to linger or dote on him. "Bloody idiots," Mohan grunted as he read the Sunday paper. The top corner flopped over, and Mohan straightened it out with a jerk of his forearms. Rishi went to sit across from him. Leaning back, Mohan folded the front page and held it out for Rishi, who had to bend forward at a great angle to retrieve it. "Read the top story," Mohan said. The headline was about the launch of investigation into the Bombay riots. Rishi's chest constricted. They had all been waiting for this announcement. India's Home Affairs Minister was asking officials to look into local Shiv Sena leader Sunny Magam's role, along with others in the national BJP party. The man in charge of the inquiry would be a former judge of Bombay's High Court, who had only taken the job after several others had turned it down. The main questions, according to the article, were how high up in the Shiv Sena party did things go, who would end up being arrested and held responsible. Rishi read each word closely, slowly. How many times had he thought to go down to the police station, turn himself in, tell them everything he knew? Now there was an independent inquiry asking witnesses to come forward. What if he delayed his flight to America? Make sure the riots didn't become part of a hidden, whitewashed past. What if he went down to the investigators' offices on Monday? They would take his confession, protect him. He felt his father watching. About 3 paragraphs in, Mohan interrupted, suddenly losing patience with this Sunday morning routine of reading the newspaper in its entirety while drinking cup after cup of tea. "How long it's taking you, just forget it." Mohan held out his arm and curled his palm upwards, gesturing for the newspaper. "So there's finally going to be an investigation," Rishi said, folding the newspaper in half and putting it on the low glass table between him and his father. Rishi saw for the 100th time the 4 dark wooden table legs, each carved as the eagle-like Garudastra, Lord Rama's weapon of choice. For the first time, Rishi noticed the mouths flared wide open, ready to swallow anything in their path, the angry eyes, the tails crisscrossed into the points of a dagger. Had the design of this harmless piece of living room furniture always been this violent? "Yes, there's going to be an investigation," his father replied, "and it has nothing to do with you." "I don't need to tell anyone I was there," Rishi started a thought. "Okay, good," Mohan said, now reading the business section. "But maybe I should talk to these investigators anyway," Rishi continued. Mohan kept the paper up. "Don't be an idiot," Mohan said, the paper blocking Rishi from seeing his father's face. "Why don't you just walk right into the jail cell too?" Rishi ground his toes together like the heads of 2 eagles colliding in midair. "All this," Mohan said, finally lowering the paper and pointing his fingers towards the front page lying between them. "All this has nothing to do with us." Rishi nodded and said nothing. "They'll get the right people in the end," Mohan continued. "They don't need you for that." Rishi hated his father for bringing up this fact, that nobody needed Rishi. What they needed was for Rishi to do as he was told. Do what his father wanted, what Kamala had wanted, what Mr. Magam had wanted. Rishi grabbed his hair with both hands until he felt the thick, wavy mass loosen. He shook his head. There was something else he needed to do, he thought. "I'll just tell them what I know about Shiv Sena, what I saw in the office." "You don't know anything," his father smirked. Rishi pulled his legs up into a V shape by grabbing his toes with his thumbs. He felt his tailbone dig into the chair's backside and suddenly was more uncomfortable than before. I need to talk to them, Papa, Rishi said, pushing harder into this new feeling of hope and guilt. His father's eyes darted up, alarmed. They don't need you. They have a lot of other people they can talk to. You'll just delay everything. His father's voice filled with an impatience Rishi knew well. I don't think I can live with myself if I don't do something, Rishi said, rubbing his face and eyes, which were now moist and brimming. You have so many other things you need to do, but not this, not this. This is not meant for you. But you don't matter to them. The plane leaves tonight. I know. Let me just talk to them before. I've been thinking. I can fly out on Monday night, start the job on Wednesday. No, Rishi, stop thinking, Mohan said, straightening up to face his son. What if they arrest you, make you an example? Have you thought of that? Nothing matters except getting on that plane. Stop thinking, Rishi repeated to himself. Stop thinking. He moved his hands down his face until his eyes pulled taut and then released everything at the bottom of his chin. He tried to feel relief, but a new unease gripped him instead. So I'm just going to run away then. Rishi said this to himself, but loud enough for his father to hear. Fine, okay, you're running away, but towards something very, very good, Mohan said. Finish your tea. Rishi smiled weakly as he took a sip from the teacup, which hovered like a trapeze artist between his fingertips. He could call the airline to see about changing his ticket. He could go talk to Kamala one last time to see if she agreed. Rishi looked into his cup. 2 lukewarm sips were left. He drained it of its final contents. Or maybe he would just get on that plane and be the devoted son he had been taught to be. His mother finally called him for breakfast. Jao beta, go eat, Mohan said, and, smiling affectionately, added, she wants to fatten you up before you leave. Thank you. Next up is Rebecca Southwick of Barry, Massachusetts. She is going to read from her second book. Thank you, Rebecca.
This is April 1995, Brooklyn, New York. Come on, Marie, Joanne said. This is blatant discrimination. We should have the right to get married. We've been a committed couple for 10 years and are still going strong. We do a hell of a lot better than most married heterosexual couples. It's time for us to go to City Hall and make a stand. Marie glared at Joe and then asked, why would I choose to suffer humiliation from some town official who has the law behind them? You know they won't give us a marriage license. Yes, but the more we make a fuss, the more they will have to listen. Olivia and Roseanne have already gone down, and yes, they were refused, but the point is to let people know that we are ordinary people, not some demented creeps. We are law-abiding, wonderful, tax-paying women with big hearts and aren't going to let those prejudiced people get away with it. I can't do it. I can't stand there and let them make a fool of us, Marie replied. Think of the gays at Stonewall who were put into jail. At least we won't go to jail. Are you sure? Joe paced around the kitchen. What right do they have to tell us who we can love? You are the sweetest person, the most giving, the most law-abiding. How can they refuse you a marriage license? Any man who beats his wife and doesn't feed his kids can get one. No questions asked. Murderers could get one. We have to go down. Please, will you go with me? Joe kneeled before Marie. while Marie shut her eyes, lifting her face toward the ceiling. When she looked back down, a lone tear ran down Joe's cheek. But what if someone from work is there and they see us? We'll get fired. Joe looked up at Marie. I know, but please? Marie went soft. She caressed Joanne's shoulders. Honey, if it means that much to you, she inhaled deeply, then yes, I'll go with you. She closed her eyes as Joe got up and drew her into a huge hug. They stood before City Hall. Joanne stood with her chest high while Marie's knees shook. Marie let out a huge sigh as they stepped onto the first step of the granite staircase leading up to the double set of red oak doors. Marie turned to Joe. Her face was pale. Are you sure you want to do this? Joe nodded. Marie closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and continued up the stairs. They made it to room 1211, the city clerk's office. Opening the door, they stepped in, went over to the counter to stand under the sign which read, "Marriage licenses here." With a bead of sweat trickling down her neck, Joe said, I'd like to apply for a marriage license. The clerk felt under the counter and came up with a form. Your full name? Joanne Cicerano. The clerk scratched her pen over the form. And your fiancé's name? Marie Antoinette Concevella. The clerk began writing, abruptly stopped, then looked up and stared at Marie. Who is this? She asked Joe. I am Marie Antoinette Concevella, Marie said, raising her chest. The woman looked at Joe and then at Marie. She looked back to study Joe's spiked short haircut. Did you say Joseph Cicerano? No, my name is Joanne Cicerano. The woman's eyes narrowed as she stared at each of them in turn and asked, Are either of you a man? No, they both said in unison. How dare you? How you God-forsaken people? The clerk whipped the application off the counter and tore it up. She looked directly at Joe. You're an abomination. Stop coming here. How dare you, Marie said, rising to her full height. How dare you call my sweet... Where did you come from? From the county jail? Go be with your sick kind in prison. Or have you escaped from the mental institution where they put the retards like you? Joe opened her mouth to speak, but Marie pushed Joe out of the way to directly face the clerk. Pointing to Joe, Marie said, This woman is the most law-abiding citizen in the world. She is the kindest, the most devoted, an affront to God. I am so glad that I have a job so I can stop the likes of you from infecting our good Christian people. Your good Christian people? Like you? You mean outrageous, bigoted assholes? Marie was a force to be reckoned with when she so chose. Joanne stood behind her with her eyebrows raised, her eyes wide open, and a smile crept across her face. The clerk shot back, You need revision therapy like I sent my daughter to. You will all rot in hell. In hell, I say. You call yourself a Christian? It's not Christian to sanctify institutionalized hatred and claim it in the name of God. You are a hate monger. Amen, Joanne chanted on the side. Security, security, the clerk yelled. She turned to Marie. No, I do not hate. I love and I am righteous. This is God's law and the people's law. Good people obey God and the law, not like the likes of you. It's bigoted assholes like you who made the law. We wouldn't, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. A uniformed officer was at Marie's side. That woman, ma'am, this way. The officer grabbed Marie's upper arm hard and escorted her toward the door, with Joanne in tow, escorted by a second security guard. Officer, we don't want to cause any trouble, Joanne told him. We'll gladly leave. Marie had managed to twist around. Goddamn bigoted bitch, she shot at the clerk as the officers shoved them out the door. Outside, Joe looked at Marie, feeling prouder of her than she had ever been. Marie was rubbing her upper arm. Taking Marie's hand, they descended the granite steps. Joe smiled from ear to ear. Marie turned back towards the door, made a fist with her right hand, and shook it mightily. Oh, they're not going to get away with this. Hey, honey, Joanne said, maybe I should have left you at home. She gave Marie a big squeeze. But really, thanks for coming. You were great. Maybe we should do this again sometime. So the next speaker is Jenny Chandler. She has been working with the Writers in Progress since the fall of 2019 and began a novel in the summer of 2020 that draws from her 30 years as an independent school teacher and administrator. While this work is of fiction, her experience with students and colleagues and knowledge of the industry in general influenced the themes and the scenes in this book.
The phone chimed just as Barbara Porter began to put away groceries. She exhaled an irritated sigh at the prospect of another scammer before realizing she was hearing one of the pet tones she'd set up for each of her daughters. This one signaled Jess, the older of her girls. Tracking the phone's tone, she looked around the kitchen before realizing it was in the pocket of the coat she'd left hanging in the mudroom. She scampered toward it, trilling, "Hold on," and began clapping the fabric between her hands in search of the phone. She pulled it out of a pocket, hit the accept button, and cried, Here I am. Hey, Mom, you sound breathless. Did I catch you at a bad time? No, sweets, I'm fine. Just running around as usual to find my phone. What's up? Any chance you're available for a cup of tea later today? I'd like to see you. Before she could agree, Barbara heard her daughter take in a particularly deep breath and stammer, It's really nothing, but something's come up. A question, maybe? Well, not so much come up. It's just been on my mind. I guess I'd like to talk. It was unusual for her otherwise rational and assertive child to ramble. Barbara felt her pulse quicken. You okay? Is it Wyatt? Oh, no, it's not Twee, is it? Is she okay? Jesus, Mom. Yes, we are okay. Everyone's fine. You saw us on Saturday, for Christ's sake. I just want to talk to you about something that's been bugging me. She paused. It's something I remember about our time at Blakemore. This was the tone Barbara was used to. She tended to fret when it came to her girls, and they didn't hold back on calling her out on it. They often joked about how she was a feelings hoarder, always adding layers of sediment to an already ample mound of worry. Over the years, she'd felt pangs of regret for how they'd been conditioned to reassure her, while simultaneously appreciating their insight and hating their scolding. She'd seen how their eyes rolled when she responded with lines like, You'll stop teasing me when you become a parent, Missy. During a particularly cruel period back when they were in high school, she snapped, My worry is not a flaw, it's a feature. When they burst out laughing, she chose not to tell them that it had been his therapist who'd suggested this new way to label her worry. You still there, Mom? Yes, I'm here. Surprised by the curtness of her own tone now, Barbara realized she was feeling a bubbling discomfort. What is she angry about now, she wondered. Jessica didn't usually throw her off like this, not anymore. She was used to this daughter's headstrong delivery, but why so early in their conversation? She quickly attributed her sprouting worry to the defensive bite about the well-being of Twyla, her beloved and only grandchild. She breathed in and said, Well, I'm relieved everyone's okay. How's later today? We could meet at Groundings. Will you have Twee in tow? I'd love to see her. No, I'm going to spring her early from daycare, but she'll be home with Wyatt. How about 3:30? Perfect, dear. I'll see you in a bit. Barbara slipped the phone back into her coat pocket, where she would inevitably have to hunt for it again. She stared through the window above the sink, taking in the mix of feeders she filled religiously once the threat of rummaging bears was no longer a concern. She wished she'd pushed for Twee to join them. Whether as a protective buffer or a pleasant distraction, she wasn't certain. She didn't want to talk about Blakemore. It had been so long. They'd left the school coming on 30 years ago, and the girls were so young then, never old enough to enroll, as she and their father had once hoped and assumed they would. Turning to make some sugary water for the hummingbird, she filled and then set the kettle on the counter. She lit the burner before remembering it was December. The tiny, sparkling birds were gone and wouldn't return for months. Her eyes fixed on the blue, dancing flame, hypnotized by thoughts of nothing in particular. After a spell, she shook her head to knock away whatever had begun to surface, then laughed out loud when she saw the budding amaryllis bulb Maddie had sent for Christmas. Perhaps this coffee chat was an excuse for the more persistent of her daughters to force something out of her. Reaching for the kettle, her hand swept across the open flame. Feeling nothing more than a bit of heat, she yelled, "God damn it, Chase!" She banged the kettle down on the hot burner before turning towards the pantry to grab a box of tea. The 2022-23 manuscript group includes 6 writers. We've heard from 5. So I'm now not only welcoming our leader, our muse, our facilitator, our best critic and editor, our trusted reader, I'm introducing Dori Ostermiller, our colleague, a fellow writer. Writing is a mix of many things, and when you benefited from other workshops with this in the studio and eased into that familiar WIP question, what is working for you? The idea of hearing other leading questions like, what's not working? And where were you thrown off or out? It's nerve-wracking and ever so helpful. Being vulnerable alongside Dori was a gift for all of us. And then we got to read and hear and learn from her writing. We felt her vulnerability and self-doubt right along with our own. We trusted her, and she in turn trusted us. Dori's going to share an excerpt from her work, a memoir we've had the pleasure to read and question and enjoy for the last 12 months.
Thank you, Jenny. I didn't know you were going to do that. Thank you. I really want to just thank this group before I start, because you guys are amazing. As everyone can tell from these readings, these books are just so rich and so nuanced and powerful. And I can't wait to see them all on the bookstore shelves, which I know they will be. So thank you so much. I'm reading from a memoir that I've been working on for a long time, about 7 years, because that's what I do. Jacqueline. This is towards the beginning of my narrator's journey. She is a 19-year-old pre-medical student at a Seventh-day Adventist professional college when the book begins, and suddenly cannot do anything and proceeds to have a pretty spectacularly bad breakdown, after which she starts to piece her life together and try to break out of the box that she's been living in. So part of that is questioning her politics. And this is the chapter where that starts to happen. She has left her Seventh-day Adventist college at this point, much to her mother's dismay, and gone to a secular institution for the first time. Are you people even alive today? Roberta Smoodin, my favorite new professor at the University of Redlands, paced before the students in her Wolf and Comrade seminar, waiting for a response. The question was something about the treatment of racism through an encased narration in the story. It was a gloomy November Wednesday, the day after Ronald Reagan's re-election by a landslide, and we were supposed to be discussing Heart of Darkness, but the mood in the classroom had turned ominous, deflated. So none of you can offer a theory as to why Conrad might have created a narrator once removed, Roberta repeated, her chalk poised at the chalkboard. No one has an opinion about the racist language in the book? There was only one person of color in our class, a pretty well-dressed woman who, rumor had it, was also a Seventh-day Adventist. And I realized with embarrassment that I was not the only person glancing at her. I wondered if the other students were worried about saying the wrong thing, as I was, or if they just hadn't read the book. Considering the novel's setting details that we discussed on Monday, Roberta surrendered the chalk to its tray. Do you even know who the narrator is? An answer burbled in my throat, half-formed, inarticulate. Are you guys hung over or something? I heard the feeble scratching of pencils, Doug Lightfoot munching his bag of Fritos. I was bursting to say something, that Conrad was purposefully distancing himself from Marlowe through the little-known first-person narrator. I had some idea of the dreamlike, dissociating effect of such layers, but I was terrified of sounding stupid to this petite, 32-year-old Jewish professor whose fourth novel had just been favorably reviewed by the New York Times. I was a little in love with her edgy wit, her deeply lidded eyes and cropped motorcycle jackets. Rumor had it that she commuted from the city and had multiple lovers. And I lived for her Thursday afternoon fiction workshop, during which Roberta had once commented that my stories had real potential. But the narrator's tone seems emotionally stilted, she'd added. Is that intentional? I couldn't really have said if my life depended on it. No matter how much I wanted to please Professor Smoodin, I always found myself speechless in her presence. I hope you all know, she said now, tossing her copy of Conrad on the desk, that this is the exact kind of apathy that got us a racist, status quo president. She turned toward the silent classroom, hands on her narrow hips. This kind of non-thinking, this kind of cowardice, she spewed, is precisely how we have somehow re-elected a corporate-owned bigot who doesn't even believe in public education. She circled the room then, raging about how Reagan was an enemy of the arts, how his trickle-down economics were killing the middle class, how he gave breaks to billionaires but cut aid for single moms, how he believed the AIDS epidemic was God's punishment for homosexuality. This is a man who believes trees are polluting the environment, she said. He thinks ketchup is a vegetable. Do you understand? Do you guys get it? Her black cowboy boots clomped between our silent rows of desks. Do you have any idea the price of your complacency? She came to a stop a few feet from me, bracing herself against the wall as if she might collapse from the effort of trying to get through to us. I could see the grayish half-moons beneath her beautifully lined eyes. Her dark pixie hair stood on end. Did you even go to the polls yesterday? She asked tiredly. Did you vote? Cautiously, I raised my hand, along with a few others in the room, though my face was smoldering and I would never admit, not even under the threat of torture, who I had voted for. Voting Republican in my family was a given. Synonymous with being a decent, hardworking American, it was tantamount to being a good Adventist Christian. I'd been taught that Democrats were at best morally sloppy and weak. At worst, they were godless losers or parasites. I'll never forget the afternoon when my grandfather, Pop, ordered Grammy's sister, my great-aunt Bertie, out of his house during a family dinner just for liking JFK. I don't remember how the argument started, but I can still picture Bertie's face, stony and sad, as she heaved open the ornate walnut doors, as she and her small-boned husband rushed into the fog. I can still hear the whine of their used Oldsmobile retreating down Cricket Hill, my grandmother sighing and disappearing to her bedroom, my own throat unaccountably thick with fear. Serves them right, Pop grumbled, clicking the TV on in the den. Goddamn liberals. Whenever I bring up this incident to my mom, she insists that the argument was over Bertie's politics, not over Bertie's politics, but her lack of religion. She was an atheist, my mom says, as if this should explain a family member's expulsion. But I swear JFK, not God, was to blame for my great-aunt's discharge from the family. I never saw her again. So I was stunned by my professor's post-election tirade. After Roberta dismissed us from class that day, I wandered the campus for an hour, too devastated to go to my other classes. Then I drove slowly back to my apartment, despondent. It was bad enough that my favorite professor despised my politics, but even worse, I didn't even understand those politics. I had never done a speck of research into the candidates. I had never even thought about what my party stood for, not once. I had simply voted the way my family and my boyfriend expected me to. I had forfeited my voice. I had traded it for the illusion of belonging. So what? From now on, you're just going to believe whatever your liberal professors tell you about politics? My boyfriend Ben asked over dinner that night. How is that any better than taking your parents' word for it? Or mine? We were sitting at my oak dining table eating lasagna that had turned leathery despite the 2 hours it had stolen from my day. That's not what I'm saying. Yes, you are. You're saying it's stupid to listen to people who you know and who you love and who have done a ton of thinking and reading about these issues. Well, maybe I can do my own thinking and reading. Sure, of course, but your opinions will be influenced by whatever you read and whoever you decide to listen to. Yeah, but they're still my opinions. Am I allowed to have a few? Oh, come on, hon. Ben chewed the lasagna, scowling. Tiny bits of tomato sauce flecked his dark beard, and I remembered suddenly the Ben I had stumbled on in the empty church sanctuary at PUC 2 years before. I remembered his limber slouch and enigmatic stare, those beautiful hands coaxing melodies from the keyboard. I hadn't heard him play anything in ages. I'm just saying, hon, that maybe Roberta has a point, I persisted. Don't you think we should at least have some understanding of the opposing views? You know, hon, this isn't really your best lasagna, is it? He said. You could have used a lot more sauce. Thank you all. Thank you for being such a great audience and for coming out on a rainy Saturday. And thank you so much to my fellow writers and manuscript group people. This was really a great year. Congratulations on all your huge amount of work. I'm going to get teary. It was a huge amount of work. Your stories are so powerful, and thanks all for being here to celebrate them. Okay, feel free to ask any questions that you have as we circulate the room. I realize that the folks on Zoom have no way of doing that. So if you want to email me a question, it's about the manuscript group or anything we do, it's Dori Ostermiller at writersinprogress.com, or you can check out our offerings on the web, www.writersinprogress.com. Thanks for coming.